Good morning, wives. Good morning. I'm on early. Listen, my phone is kind of like cricket a little bit. It is because this charger that I had, it wasn't charging. So in order for me to keep the charge going, I had to put it up here like this. Good morning, wives. So y'all see the title here. Won't be holding you long on this subject. I've been warring with some things over the past 24 hours, and I did not want to come on and talk about this. I really did not want to talk about this. And I've been hearing that song in my spirit. Here is my worship, all of my worship. That's been my song in my spirit. Here is my worship, all of my worship. So I'm coming on. Good morning, wives. Happy self-care Saturday. Happy self-care Saturday. I want to encourage you, if you have any questions, to put it in the question box. I actually have another session after this, and I have a post office run, so I am not going to hold you long at all. This is one topic that I would not get into too much detail on. I'm being obedient. I'm simply being obedient today. I will give you some Bible verses to reference, and I will encourage you to go back and do your own reading and studying. All right. For the ones of some of my followers, most of my followers know that I don't coach the divorced wife. I normally don't coach the divorced wife. Nothing against the divorced wife. That's just an area that the Lord has he withheld that area from me. That was just an area that he told me to not coach in. And so that's why I won't get into this, but I felt like some things needed to come up today based off of the time that I've been spending with God, that he wanted me to bring up. And so I'm here, y'all. Happy Self-Care Saturday. Listen, let me share some transparency with you real fast. A little transparency. I'm going to start off with some transparency. We're going to kick off with, my little introduction, and I'm going to give y'all like the little, the rundown of what we're going to talk about. When my husband, y'all know, Coach C's story, my husband ended up getting ill. He ended up getting sick. And that was the first time. That was the first time that he made his way back home. When my husband was in the hospital, he had specific instructions from the Lord. When he tried leaving again, he had specific instructions from the Lord. However, to back up from that a little bit, prior to his return home, and when he was, sleeping, I had spoke with a prophetic woman. One of my girlfriends had connected me with this prophetic woman. And she didn't really know much of my story or anything, and I had kind of like briefly shared with her a little bit. And she spoke to me during that time. And she said that my husband knew what he had to do when he woke up. She told me that my husband was gonna get up, and that he knew what he was supposed to do. The Lord had given him specific instructions on what he was supposed to do when he woke up. And so when he woke up, and, once we came home and, time and time again, time had passed, he did reveal those instructions to me that what the Lord told him that he had to do. And so this is one of the reasons why I always say to wives, if God is talking to you about your husband, God is talking to your husband about you. If God is talking to you about your husband, God is also talking to your husband about you. However he has to get to your husband, by whatever means that he has to get to your husband, he will find a vehicle to relay the message to your husband that he needs to get to him. So a lot of times when wives think that, oh, nothing is changing, nothing is happening, my husband is still acting the same way, I ain't seen no changes, you have to understand, if God is speaking to you about your husband, God is speaking to your husband about you. Okay, that's how this goes. God speaks to husbands too, wife. God speaks to husbands too. He knows how to reach your husband. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the state that he's in. He knows how to reach your husband. It doesn't matter. Good morning. It doesn't matter the state that he is in. Okay. One of the things that I always emphasize on my page, and I'm trying to take my time so I can kind of like break everything down before I get into this strong topic. One of the things and one of the reasons why I always emphasize to wives about her husband being her assignment is because somewhere on that journey, somewhere along the way, God had spoken to you, wife, showed you something, brought some things to your attention in the beginning of the relationship. Somewhere down the line, God showed you something in reference to your marriage. Somewhere down the line. When me and my husband first started dating, it was several things that, God showed me that, this was going to be my husband. I was going to be his wife. And, I had a specific, purpose in his life. And he definitely has a specific purpose in my life as well. But this was just God speaking to me. I felt like from a prophetic, perspective. My husband, when I first met him, I won't say when I first met him. I want to say when I started, we kind of like started dating and hanging out a little bit. I remember going over to his place, and I remember it was raining. He came downstairs with the umbrella and he was like, I've been waiting for you. I've been waiting for you. I remember him telling me like, I prayed for you. I prayed for you like that. And I'm like, boy, what you mean you prayed for me? What you talking about? When you dating and stuff, you ain't really think about stuff like that. That was one time. It was another incident that happened where, we was in my apartment and my husband was asking me all these different questions about like worldly things. Now, Coach T, I ain't say I'm a plain Jane, but I'm pretty close to her. Okay. I was a plain Jane then, and I'm most definitely a plain Jane now. And so some of the things he was asking me, I was like, dude, why is you so into this stuff? Like, why does that stuff even matter or whatever? And, he would notice that, I was just like, okay, like, that stuff don't even matter. But it wasn't revealed to me till later on, that part of those things were things that God was, bringing to my attention and that God was showing me. And so, I remember when hard times hit our marriage. And when I remember the Lord told me the day that my husband was my assignment. I remember him telling me, like, your husband is your assignment. I didn't understand what that mean. I didn't understand what that meant until many, months later. Or years later, because it wasn't months, it was years later that I didn't really understand what that mean. And so he told me that, your husband is your assignment. And so as time and time or whatever had went on, and we had got to that broken place in our marriage where it was like, God, I don't want to do this no more. Like, I'm really tired. I don't want to do this no more. Like, I want to exit out of this. And I asked God, like, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of you having me, in this man's life? Because I don't really want to do this no more. And I remember the Lord telling me, he said, your purpose is to reveal, Jesus Christ. Your purpose in his life is to keep him alive. Your purpose in his life is to cover him, And so that was some of the things that God had started showing me, and was bringing back to my remembrance when I had those days of, I don't want to do this no more. Like, I don't really want to do this no more, right? And so the second time when my husband made a decision, well, no, that was the third time. Actually, the third time my husband made a decision to leave the home, it was right after, we had like a major situation had happened with him. And when he came back, I remember him telling me as well, just like the Lord had told me. The Lord had told me, well, your husband, he's going to be back home. He'll be back. He said, I'm going to always bring him back to you. I'm going to always bring him back to you. And so I remember when my husband came home and he told me, he said, the Lord told me that, I need to come home and be here with you and the boys. The first time when he was in the hospital, or the second time, because the second time was the longest. The first time, I don't think we even had I don't remember everything with the first time, but the second time was with a hospital situation. And then the third time, he came back, he said, the Lord told me, to come back home. And one of the things I remember him saying to me, he said, he told me to come home. He told me to come home and be with you and the boys. He said, but it's a lot of pretty girls out there. This is what he said. He said, it's a lot of pretty girls out there. It's a lot of pretty girls out here. So, but I'm here. And so what I got from that was, he knew what God had spoken to him. He knew what God had, specifically said to him. And so I always just like to share transparency like that to really help wives understand, you didn't just fall upon this type of injury in your marriage. You didn't just just stumble upon this injury. It's like God has been walking with you, coaching you, guiding you, showing you things from the beginning. All right. That's my whole reasoning for sharing that. God has been showing you things from the beginning. A lot of times when a husband and wife enter into the marriage covenant, God been already told you yay or nay. God been already told you yay or nay. I remember asking God when me and my husband got married. I said, God, is this something that you want me to do? Is it something that I'm supposed to, be doing? And the Lord did not respond to me. He didn't say anything. And so I didn't know then at that time in my how I was when I got married. 22. I was 22, 23. I think I was 22 when he was 21. So good morning. I didn't know in my young age at that time that, when you don't hear from the Lord that you're supposed to yield, you're supposed to wait. But I always felt like the Lord was going to use my marriage as a means of teaching me and showing me him. All right. I feel like God was going to use my marriage, and that's exactly what he did. That's exactly what he did. He used my marriage as a way to, grow my relationship with him. So I share that to say, wives, you have to understand your marital separation, injury don't just happen. Your marital injury, your marital pain that has occurred, these things don't just happen. Most of the times, 9 out of 10 times, God has already showed you things in the beginning. He been already showed you things when while y'all were dating. He been already showed you things before y'all even went down, before y'all even went down, the altar. God been already showed you things ahead of time. I remember I was in medical assistant school. I was in medical assistant school, and my husband, he used to go with me, sometimes to the interviews, or sometimes he would go with me to the school. We'd be hanging out. It was his day off or whatever, and I remember when I was introducing him to people, I didn't even feel comfortable introducing him to people as my boyfriend, because he didn't feel like my boyfriend. My husband always felt like my husband. And so I was like, yeah, this is my boyfriend. But it was it didn't feel comfortable with me saying that he was my boyfriend, because he always felt like my husband. When me and my husband got together, it was like I knew I was supposed to be with him. He was supposed to be with me. He was supposed to be with me, and we just connected. However, it still did not change, me going to God and asking God, was this something I was supposed to do? And even with God not answering me saying yay or nay, I still did it anyways. And what I got from that later on was God showing me even if I would have told you not to do it, you would have still did it anyways. But we felt so natural. It felt so natural together. God is always speaking. God is always using people, scriptures, things, dreams, visions to communicate to his people. God is always trying to get a message to you. So when I hear wives tell me things like, oh, well, I'm not hearing from God, or, oh, I'm not sure, I'm not sure God is telling me, God is always speaking. God is always speaking. You just have to get in a position and get in a place so that you can hear him. Your marriage injury, your marriage separation, your marriage pain, your marriage situation that has come up was not like all of a sudden. No, God has been speaking to you from the beginning. God has been speaking to you from the giddy up. And so I wanted to share that part before I kind of got into the introduction and got into like what I want to share today. So on that note, welcome wives, welcome. Happy Self-Care Saturday. Happy Self-Care Saturday. My name is Coach T. My name is Coach T for some of my new followers. I am a Christian mental health wife coach and marriage consultant. As a marriage consultant, I help wives to identify her marital grief related to adultery, abandonment, or addiction, helping her to understand where she and her husband is on their journey. And then I also help her to understand the spiritual side of her marriage. All right. I help her to understand her spiritual side of her marriage. But as a wife coach, I coach wives who are going through a marital separation, identify the pain that she, the wife, has contributed to the breakdown of her marriage. Okay. I help the wife to identify the pain that she contributed to the breakdown of her marriage. All right. We confront these areas of her marital grief by prioritizing her well-being, her self-care. This is why the self-care thing, this is what this comes in at. And I do this by supporting the wife on her own personal healing journey. All right. This is how I coach wives. And that's why I always emphasize to wives, I'm not coaching you for your husband. I'm coaching you for your part. I'm coaching you for you to address past relationships, past injuries, past experiences that you, wife, may have brought into the marriage, relationship that has brought on repetitive cycles, repetitive patterns that keeps you in the same position stuck year after year after year. A lot of times wives are confused about, well, my husband was the one who cheated, not me. Or my husband was the one who did, wrong, not me. Or my husband is the one who's having an adulterous affair. My husband is the one who has left his marital home, not me. I'm here. I want our marriage to work. I want, our marriage to, get back into a healthy place. And one of the things I always emphasize to that is somewhere on that journey, some place on your journey, you have also bought some type of pain, some type of injury that has contributed to the breakdown of the marriage. And because you have bought that in the marriage, as a wife coach, I help you, wife, to work on that area of you. Okay. I help you to work on that area of you, the part that you have contributed and brought into the marriage, because it's not just all about your husband. At the end of the day, God holds you accountable for the part that you play in the marriage. You can't do anything about your husband's part. He only holds you accountable for the part that you play, All right. And so on that note, welcome. Now, the topic of divorce and remarriage is a very, very, very controversial subject. All right. And many people, leaders, pastors, people in general, have their own personal opinion about it. Like I mentioned earlier, I do not coach the divorced wife. However, out of obedience today, the Lord has petitioned me to speak on this matter. And so I want to share my perspective. I want to share my side of the story when it comes down to divorce and remarriage. Okay. There will come a time, wife. There will come a time when God will place you in a situation that you are either going to trust him or you're going to trust him. You're going to either trust him or you're going to trust him. I want to share with you three truths. About God. All right. 3 truths about God. And I want you to be mindful of these things and go back and sit with these things and reflect and think about a time or a moment when God has brought these things up to, to your attention. God is not going to give you everything. He is not going to give you all the pieces to the puzzle. You will have to just wait and see what the outcome will be. God is not going to ever give you all the pieces to the puzzle. He's not going to ever give you everything at one time. God don't operate like that. He's going to give you piece by piece by piece. As you mature, as you grow, as you go deeper in him, he'll be able to trust you with more things. You will be able to receive more things. God is a God who is patient, okay? And he's not going to give you everything. He's not going to tell you the whole story all at one time. This is why I always emphasize to wives, stop expecting to get everything you need out from a one-time session. You're not going to get it. Because I can tell you something today, and then tomorrow God will reveal something else to you, and then it was something else that you need to know. So you're not going to get everything at one time from God. He's not going to do that. That's one. The second thing, God doesn't change his mind. He is solid. When the Bible says God is a man that he should not lie, he is not a man that he should not lie. God does not change his mind. What he say is what he say. His word does not change. His word is solid. Okay, his word is solid. However, he will, and he can change your desires. He will, and he can change your desires. Okay, the Bible talks about that. I think it's in Psalms that God will give us, God gives us the desires of our hearts. God will give us the desires of our heart, and this is one of the reasons why I'm always telling wives to do your work, put your work in, do your work, put your work in, because God is constantly working on you. And as he's working on you, he's changing you, he's molding you, he's equipping you, he's pruning you, he's doing things all the time. And so sometimes you may have entered one place on your journey feeling one kind of way, and then later on you enter, you later on as you go further down the line, now all of a sudden you don't feel the same way that you felt the first time, or you don't feel the same way that you felt in the beginning. God will change the desires, okay? He will change your desires, but his word does not change, okay? His word does not change. Third thing, God has the final say. Okay, God has the final say. When they say the cross has the final word, God will have the final say. Ultimately, his will be done. Ultimately, his will be done. All right. And so I'm going to jump down. And read. I'm going to actually read Matthew chapter 19, verses 3 to 9. I want to read this. And again, I'm going to share some scriptures with you for you to go back later on, for you to kind of do your own studying and your own, further, studying and go in a little bit deeper. So some Pharisees came to him to test him. All right. They asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Some Pharisees came to him to test him, and they asked, is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason? Jesus replied, haven't you read? He replied that at the beginning, the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and will be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate. Verse 7. Why then, they asked, did Moses command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away? Jesus replied, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard. But it was not this way from the beginning. Verse 9. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, and marries another woman, commits adultery. God, I pray now in your son Jesus' name that you make your word plain, clear, that the wife will understand this. For the person who needs to understand this, I pray, God, that you make this plain and clear for them to receive it on today. In Jesus' name, amen. Jesus states divorcing your spouse on the grounds of immorality, that's adultery, infidelity, frees the offended mate to remarry without committing adultery. If your husband or wife has committed adultery, Jesus has allowed that person to exit out of that marital covenant, and if this person desires to remarry, they now have the option to remarry without being in an adulterous relationship. That's Bible. That's what God's word says. Referencing divorce, because I don't want to get into this, because like I said, it's so controversial, and it can take you all different kind of ways. But I'm going to just kind of share my version, my perspective, and like I said, I will share some scriptures, and you can go and do your own reading and studying later. If a wife has made attempts to reconcile with the unrepentant husband, this includes forgiving him, giving him chances after chances, hearing from God, fasting, praying, studying, sitting, going and getting counsel. If she has done this, and she has done these things, and her husband still has not come to a place of repentance, she now has that option to say, you know what? I did the 70 times 7 rule. I went to God. I sat with these scriptures. I fasted. I studied. I did my part. I did what I was supposed to do. Now she has been given a release to exit out of this marriage. Okay. If she makes a decision to divorce her husband, both her and her husband can walk away out of that marriage covenant free. She can walk away because she has biblical reasons to exit out of that marriage covenant because of the infidelity or because of the adulterous affair or what have you. And then the husband also walks out of that free and has the option to remarry because his wife divorced him for his infidelity. All right? Now, I want to pause and say this. This is not a receipt or a recipe to follow. This is only an example based upon some of the wife clients that I have been working with. This is not necessarily every wife's story. I'm not on here to tell you, oh, this is the recipe for you to now go and to divorce your husband. That's not what I'm on here to say. I'm simply saying this is an example that I'm using based off of some of the wives that I have worked with, okay? The wife has a solid reason to divorce her husband after she has done the above things mentioned. After she has petitioned the Lord, after she has went and got counsel, after she has prayed and fasted, after she has forgiven him, after she has walked this thing out and, I'm going to carry my marital cross, she has now got the release from God that I can walk away from this marriage. Divorce is not always sin, but adultery is. Divorce is not always sin, but adultery is. And the reason why she can walk out of this marriage after she has done those things that I just mentioned is because Hebrews chapter 10, verses 26 to 27, the NIV version says, if we deliberately keep on sinning after we have received the knowledge of the truth, no sacrifice for sins is left, but only a fearful expectation of judgment and of raging fire that will consume the enemies of God. Okay? In other words, if the wife have come to the husband, have shared with the husband, I don't like this, you are in sin, this is not right. He knows what he's doing is not right. He knows that he's in sin. He knows that he's not doing these things. And he said, okay, forgive me. Okay, I'm going to forgive you. And then he turn around a year later. He does the same thing all over again. Does the same type of, have the same type of affair all over again. This wife is still praying. This wife is still trusting God. This wife is still petitioning God about her marriage. Okay. She forgives him again. Okay. She forgives him again. Now, another couple of months later come along, he still now is doing these same things. He's still being out here in these adulterous affairs. He's still having his way. He's still, not only is the wife petitioning the Lord in prayer, not only is the wife petitioning the Lord, through fasting, but the wife is communicating with God. God, what is it you're telling me to do? God, is it okay for me to leave the marriage now? God, is it okay for me to exit out of this marriage now? What is it that you're telling me to do? There is a cutoff from sin. There is a cutoff from sin. Okay? I always highly encourage wives who are contemplating divorce to go into deeper prayer, fasting, and hearing from God before making that decision. I always emphasize that. Okay? You want to make sure that you have done everything that you know that you can do when it comes down to reconciling that marriage, keeping that marriage covenant, doing your part. This is why I always tell wives, you don't have the right to just say, "Oh, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with this foolery. I don't want to deal with this kind of stuff. I'm done with this marriage," and just walk away. And you don't petition the Lord. You don't go in prayer. You don't go in fast. You don't go and hear what God say. Sometimes God may not necessarily give you the outing or the outie right away. Sometimes God may not necessarily say, "Oh, okay, you can go ahead and do this or whatever." You don't get to just make that decision on your own without going through God, because you have a cross to carry in this, wife. You have a cross to carry in this because you came into covenant with your husband. Even God himself will turn people over to a reprobate mind if they are not willing to yield to his instructions, if they're not willing to yield to the things that he's trying to show them, if they're not willing to yield to the help that he's sending. Even God will turn a person over. So there is a cutoff to sin, even though God hates divorce. Okay? Even though God hates divorce, there is still a cutoff. And there will come a time, there can come a time on your journey when God said, "We finish here. We finished." All right? This is why. The reason why you want to make sure that you go to God and get everything from God and make sure that you are absolutely certain, "God, this is what you're telling me to do." Because once you, wife, have made a decision to divorce your husband, there is no more covenant. That covenant goes away. That covenant now is no longer there. You are no longer in covenant with your husband. You are free, and now your ex-husband is also not free. So this is why I emphasize to wives about making sure that you have heard from God. Because once you make a decision to divorce, that covenant does not exist anymore. That makes the covenant go completely away. Everybody got fresh new starts. Okay? It goes away. All right? So if then your husband now decides to remarry, you as his ex-wife don't get to come and ask for him back, because now you are coming against a new covenant. This is one of the reasons why I don't get into this. This is one of the reasons why I don't get into heavy discussion about this. Because now you have divorced your husband for infidelity. You have heard from God. God has given you the petition to move forward with the divorce. Now, all of a sudden, your husband has moved on. He has remarried. He is in another marriage or in another relation, in another marriage. And now you're saying, "I want my husband back." He's not your husband anymore. He's no longer your husband. He is now the husband of the other person, the new wife that he's in covenant with. If you divorced him based off of infidelity, if you divorced him based off of him having an adulterous affair, you have went to God, you have petitioned God in prayer about him, you have, forgiven him, you have gotten permission from God, he's no longer your husband. He's no longer your husband. And so now, if you now come back later and you have a change of mind, "Oh, I want my husband back," that covenant you and your ex-husband had is no longer existing. It has disappeared. It is no longer there. It no longer exists. So you cannot now say, "I want my husband back." No. If you divorce your husband due to his infidelity, he is no longer your husband. He is now his new wife's husband. Okay? So this is where it gets tricky. This is where it gets tricky. Because some people say, some people some people believe, believe God for your marriage. Believe God for your marriage. Believe God for your marriage. Now, let's just say you divorced your husband, but it wasn't because he was in an adulterous affair. You divorced your husband, but it wasn't because he had, infidelity. All right. You didn't go to God. You ain't really, did no forgiving. You ain't wait to get, God's permission on things. You didn't seek God out, in prayer. And now you divorce your husband. Now that puts your husband in a place now where, you are in an adulterous relationship can happen now because this person, divorced that husband, not based off of what Moses have allowed spouses to divorce their husbands, to divorce their spouses from. All right. So now your husband is now going into a new relationship as an adulteress. However, he can ask for forgiveness. However, he does not have control necessarily of what his wife does. And so he can be removed from that. Right? Okay? He can be removed from that. So when you hear people say, you are still considered that man's wife, you are still considered his wife. You can still believe God for his marriage, even though he has moved on with someone else. That's a little tricky. That's a little tricky. Can God do the impossible? He absolutely can. Can God reconcile marriages and bring people back together? He absolutely can. Okay? He absolutely can. But you want to be real careful about entering into something like that or going along with something like that, because it's kind of like borderline witchcraft now. All right? It's a little bit borderline witchcraft. All right? If you only have divorced your husband after going to God in prayer, after fasting, after forgiving, after hearing God, and this man has continued in an adulterous relationship, he has continuously continued in an adulterous having adulterous affairs, and you continue to forgive him, and you're saying, God, how many more times I have to keep on forgiving him? How many more times I have to keep on going along with this? How many times I have to keep on accepting this type of behavior? And then God gives you the release to move on. You can walk out this marriage. That covenant no longer exists. He's no longer your husband. He is like a single man, and you are like a single woman. That covenant no longer exists. But if you have divorced him, any other reason outside of adultery, now you're in a position where you have placed him in an adulterous relationship with another person. If he decides to marry that person, he is now considered an adulterous relationship. But that man can still get his life together, pray to God, ask for forgiveness. God, I didn't have no control over my wife divorcing me. Can I be free now to walk into this relationship? Because if you go back to 1 Corinthians chapter 7, when it talks about if the unbelieving spouse goes, let them go. That doesn't mean if the unbelieving spouse goes and say, I'm staying over here for a temporary time. That means if the unbelieving spouse make a decision to divorce that person, that spouse is no longer in bondage to that person. That spouse is no longer in bondage or, in bondage to that. That person is now free. They are free. They can walk away from this slave free. All right. If the divorce was infidelity, but he had remarried, you can shoot your shot. You can shoot your shot. You can say, I want, God, I want my husband back. God, I want to, I'm praying for my husband. I'm believing for you to reconcile marriage. Those things can happen. There is nothing impossible with God. There is nothing impossible with God. But you have to understand, your husband, your ex-husband, when he remarried and you divorce him due to infidelity, he is no longer your husband. He is no longer your husband. So when you say, oh, well, I want my husband back, but you divorce your husband for his adulterous affair, and now he has remarried and he's living with his new wife, that's no longer your husband. That's that woman's husband now. That is that woman's husband. Okay? And so this is why I don't get into all that, because it can get real tricky. It can get real, and like I said, it's borderline witchcraft. All right? This is borderline witchcraft. If you are trying to covet another woman's husband, that is witchcraft. Because once that divorce has been made, once that divorce has been sealed, he's no longer your husband. If you divorced him due to infidelity, he's no longer your husband. Okay? So there is a ministry, Rejoice Ministry, who is known for wives standing after a divorce. There is a ministry who's known for wives standing after a divorce. I would encourage you, if you are a divorced wife and you are still believing God to reconcile your marriage, I would encourage you to seek out that ministry. Like I said, that is not Coach T area of expertise. That is not my area of, where I get into that kind of stuff, because God has not given me permission to coach a divorced wife. All right. I say, if you are going through a divorce, or if a divorce has taken place, one of the best things that you can do for yourself is heal and get in alignment with God. Put your marriage situation stuff on hold. One of the things that you need to be doing is to heal and get in alignment with God. All right? Nothing is impossible. Okay? But if you divorce your husband because of infidelity, and you have gotten permission from the Lord, and you have been fasting and praying, and you did that, you went that route, guess what? Once you divorce that man, it's sealed. It's done. That covenant no longer exists. He is no longer your husband after you have divorced him. Okay? And if you try now to go after him, I want my husband back. You are walking in witchcraft. You are walking in witchcraft. Because now you are covenant another person's husband. Because he's no longer your husband. Okay? He's no longer your husband. Like I said, this is one of the reasons why I emphasize making sure you, one, hear from God. You need to hear from God. This is why I tell wives, go deep. Separation is a time out. Separation, when you're going through a marriage separation, it's a time out. It gives you a chance, it gives you an opportunity to hear from God and know exactly which direction you want to go. Okay? Because once you have did what you have did, hey, it's a done deal. You can't now say, oh, I want my husband back. But you divorced him because he was having an adulterous affair. That marriage is over with. Now he done remarry. You want your husband back and he's with another woman? He's with his new wife? No. That's not how this go. Okay? 2, make sure you have gotten God's permission to exit out of your marriage. So even if your husband is in an adulterous affair, and even if he's doing these things, and even if you have forgiven him, and even if, you've been fasting and praying, you need to make sure that God has given you permission to exit out of that marriage. Okay? You need to make sure that God has given you permission to exit out of that marriage. I want to share with you some Bible verses that you can go back and reference and study for yourself. All right? You can go back to read 1 Corinthians chapter 7. You can go back and read Matthew chapter 19. You can go back and read Malachi chapter 2. And you can go back and read Exodus chapter 20 verse 14. All right? These are some scriptures that you can go and read for yourself and dig down a little bit deeper when it comes down to remarriage and divorce and, what God says about these things. You want to go and dig down in this a little bit deeper. All right. If you still have questions, you then need to connect with someone who can better assist you on this matter. All right. Like I said, currently, God has not given Coach T the release to divorce wives yet. That's not an area that he has given me to coach in. He has not given me that release. However, if you are still married, and you are contemplating your next steps, I want to encourage you to get connected with someone who can help you. All right. I want to encourage you to get connected with someone who can help you. This marriage, remarriage, divorce, this is a huge topic. It is very controversial, but you got to go into the scriptures and read and know for yourself what it is that you're supposed to be doing. And this is why I always tell wives, tread lightly when it comes down to making a decision if you want to divorce. You need to hear, make sure you heard, make sure you know, you need to go deeper. Because once you have made a decision to exit out of that covenant, he's no longer your husband. He's no longer your husband, okay? Even for the wife who's living in the home with the unrepentant husband, okay? You have to know when God is telling you to walk away and release him, it's time for you to walk away and release him. A lot of times on this journey, like I said, my husband had left our marital home 3 times. The Lord had my husband left our marital home 3 times. I was separated 3 times. And in all those times, like I said, in the beginning, when my husband left the second time, I went and filed for a divorce. And I heard the Lord tell me to go and drop it. I heard the Lord tell me to get rid of that. Get rid of that. Now, did that stop my husband from, leaving the home? No, he still left the home. He still left the home. But the Lord told me, I heard the Lord tell me to go and drop the divorce. Okay? And so you have to know that God is telling you to stay, or you have to also know when God's telling you to move on and it's time to go. You have to know when God's telling you to stay, and you have to also know when God's telling you to move on, because you don't want to fall into idolatry. You don't want to fall into idolizing, okay? You don't want to just be going along with stuff, and God has already told you this is done. We finish here. What he had told the prophet when he was mourning over Saul, we done here. Why are you still crying over this matter? Why are you still dealing with this? This is done. We done. We're moving over. I have chosen David not to be my new king. Okay? And so wives need to know when it's time to walk away. Wives need to know if God is telling you to walk away. All right? You need to get the correct type of counsel in that area. You don't want to just go to any random person. Like I said, Rejoice Ministries is known for marriages after divorce. And they may have a different perspective. They may have a different, they may have a different way of explaining that. And so I would encourage you, go and seek them out, or go seek out someone who handles that area of when it comes down to the, remarriage. That's not an area that my area of specialties is separation. My area of specialty is separation, because my goal, I want you to stay in that marriage as long as you're supposed to stay in that marriage and hear from God. Because once you hear from God, from there, you have to make a decision whether or not you go, stay, or what you're going to do next, okay? We are entering into a new era, and things are shifting. You need to get in position so you can hear what God is telling you. You need to get in a position so you can hear what God is telling you why, all right? And if you are ready to do your own personal work, listen, one of the reasons why I offer her Bonnie Cebu's curriculum, is a transformative curriculum. Okay? It holds wives accountable for the role she's played in her marriage. It holds wives accountable for the role that she plays. It teaches her how to recover from her own mistakes, past wounds, and traumas. I don't coach the wife so we can get your husband back. I coach the wife to address her dysfunction. I coach the wife to look at herself. I coach the wife to pay attention to the things that she may have contribute about into the marriage. That is why I coach the wife. Okay. I always tell you, I don't coach you for you to get your husband back. But a lot of times, once you get back into that healthy place, a lot of marriages have been reconciled because that wife has got healthy and because she has done her own personal inner work. When I coach wives, I'm not coaching you for you to get your husband back. I'm coaching you for you to get healed. I'm coaching you for you to do your part. I'm coaching you so you can see the dysfunction that you brought into the marriage. I'm coaching you so you can be able to discern whether or not, like, dang, I really, I've been a problem in this, too. This is what I'm coaching you for. When you do a consultation, I give you a strategy, I give you an action plan on what you need to do about as far as your marriage goes. But when you want to coach and you want to get serious about this journey that you're on, then we're going to start with you. We're going to talk about your husband, but we're going to start with you. We're going to start with you. And even as we are journeying, we're going to still talk about your husband. Every month, my wife check in. I bring up their husband. I ask them 4 solid questions about their marriage and their husband. And we face that. But overall, I'm trying to make sure that she's good. Overall, I'm checking in on her. Overall, I'm trying to make sure she's right. I had a wife recently call me, Coach C is the midwife of wife recovery and self-care and wife self-care. I take that name. I take being called the midwife for wife recovery and wife self-care. Yeah. because I'm trying to help that wife get back to a healthy place. We can't do nothing about your husband. I help you bring understanding about your husband. I bring forth words that the Lord releases to me to share with you about your husband. But at the end of the day, I'm trying to get you in that healthy place, right? I'm trying to get you better. You won't be no good to your husband anyways if you are not. And so that's why I always say, if you are serious about this journey, a lot of wives not serious. They just kind of like just want to I want to get some encouragement. I want to just kind of like keep doing what I want to do. I kind of want to just, I don't really want to heal. I think I heard a pastor just talk about that recently. I don't really want to heal. I want to just get what I want. I want to just get what I can get out of this and keep it moving. I don't really want to deal with my dysfunctions. Then you don't really want a whole, healthy, long journey marriage. Not for real. Not for real. And I share this sometimes with some of my wives, even if a divorce occurs in the marriage, even if a divorce comes, God can reconcile. God can bring that marriage back together. God can do that. If God, don't think just because, okay, well, God gave me a promise. He told me this was going to happen, but then he still divorced me anyways. God does not change his mind about his promises. He don't change his mind about his promises. All right. He has his own personal process of how he do things. His ways is not our ways. His thoughts are not our thoughts. It's not the same. He is sovereign. God can do what he wants to do. He's God. All right. He is God. And so what I want to say today is, wife, if you are ready to do your own personal inner work, I would encourage you to sign up for your wife consultation. I want you to sign up for your wife consultation. You can sign up at my website, www.marriagechroniclesbytanika.com. www.marriagechroniclesbytanika.com. Why? You have to make a decision to get healthy for yourself. Come get some understanding about your husband. Come get some understanding about your marriage. Come understand the spiritual side of your marriage. Come and see what's going on. And like I said, we do discuss those things in her Bonus Boost, but that ain't the focus. My promise for my wives who I coach and my curriculum, her Bonus Boost, my promise is I coach wives going through a marital separation, identify the pain she contributed to the breakdown of her marriage. I deal with the wife. I'm strictly dealing with the wife. I help her to confront her marital grief by prioritizing her well-being, aka her self-care. And I do this by supporting her to do her own personal walk, to do her own personal healing, to get on her own personal journey of healing. All right. So if you are ready to heal, wife, if you are ready to heal and you're ready to continue to do this thing God's way, listen, I want to encourage you. You can sign up today at www.marriagechroniclesbytanika.com. Listen, happy Self-Care Saturday. Happy Self-Care Saturday. Make sure that you are prioritizing yourself today, wives. Make sure that you do something that you enjoy doing. Listen, and I will see y'all on the other side. Blessings.